The recruitment station smelled like failure and cheap disinfectant. I stood there, all 6 of my arms crossed in varying degrees of skepticism, watching the holographic display flicker through species after species. My name is Velkrin, Senior Acquisitions Officer for the Galactic Defense Coalition, and I had exactly 3 solar rotations to fill 200 combat positions before the Kryllian front collapsed entirely. "Next candidate pool," I muttered, tapping the console with my lower right manipulator. The display shimmered. Text appeared. Terra. Classification: Emerging Species. Military designation: Restricted Access. My primary eyes narrowed. Restricted access? For a backwater planet barely past their atomic age? I keyed in my override codes because, honestly, when you are this desperate, protocols become suggestions. What loaded next made my mandibles click in confusion. The file contained exactly 1 word repeated across every metric. Classified. Their combat effectiveness? Classified. Psychological warfare capabilities? Classified. Special operations records? You guessed it. Classified. "This is useless," I said to no one in particular. My assistant, a nervous plicton named Jibbix, shuffled closer on his 8 legs. "Sir, perhaps we should skip this species entirely. If their files are this restricted, they might be dangerously unstable or exactly what we need," I finished, already pulling up the contact protocols. "Get me a connection to their military liaison, now." 3 hours later, I was staring at a human woman through the holographic communicator, and she was staring right back with eyes that seemed far too calculating for a species that only discovered faster-than-light travel 6 months ago. Her name was Colonel Victoria Hunt. She wore a simple green uniform, her dark hair pulled back so tight it probably gave her a headache, and she smiled like someone who knew a joke that nobody else had figured out yet. "Officer Velkrin," she said, her translator rendering her words in perfect galactic standard. "I understand you need soldiers." "We need bodies," I corrected, too tired for diplomacy. "The Kryllians are pushing through Sector 7. We have lost 3 defensive lines in 2 weeks. Can your species fight? Or did I waste 3 hours pulling classified files?" Her smile widened. Not in a friendly way. In a way that made my dorsal plates itch. "We can fight," she said slowly, "but I need to know something first. Are you asking for soldiers, or are you asking for warriors?" I blinked all 4 eyes in sequence. "Is there a difference?" Oh, sweetheart. And the way her translator rendered that word dripped with condescension. There is a universe of difference. Soldiers follow orders. Warriors win wars. Which do you need? "Both," I said flatly. "I need both." "Can you provide them? Or should I move on to species 6012? Colonel Hunt leaned back in her chair. The lighting in her office cast shadows across her face that made her look like something from a cautionary tale. "I can provide exactly what you need. But I am sending you something specific. Something your coalition has never seen before." "We have seen everything," Jibbix interjected nervously. "The galaxy has been at war for 2 millennia. There are no surprises left." The colonel's laugh was short and sharp. "You poor thing. You actually believe that?" She leaned forward again, resting her elbows on her desk. "Officer Velkrin, I am going to send you 200 humans, but here is the catch. They are all going to be women." Silence filled the communication chamber. I stared at her. Jibbix stared at her. Even the monitoring AI seemed to pause in confusion. "Women," I repeated carefully, because surely my translator had malfunctioned. "Women," she confirmed. "Female. The human designation for our species' secondary reproductive phenotype. Is your translator broken, or do you need me to speak slower? I know what women are, I snapped, my bioluminescent patches flaring orange with irritation. What I don't understand is why you would send your breeding population into active combat. That is tactically insane. Most species protect their females specifically because they are biologically valuable for species continuation. The temperature in the room seemed to drop, even across light years of distance. Colonel Hunt stood up slowly. She was not particularly tall by human standards, I would learn later, but something about her posture made her seem enormous. Let me explain something to you, Officer Velkrin, because you are clearly operating under some unfortunate assumptions. Human women are not delicate. We are not decorative. We are not weak. And we are certainly not sitting around waiting to be protected. She started pacing, and I found myself tracking her movement like prey tracks a predator. Human women, she continued, her voice taking on a lecturing quality, have fought in every war our species has ever waged. We have done it in secret when we were not allowed. We have done it in disguise when we were forbidden. We have done it against our own people's wishes when necessary. The only thing you need to understand is this. If you put a human woman on a battlefield and tell her to hold a line, she will hold that line until her bones turn to dust, or the enemy stops coming, whichever happens first. Jibbix made a small, squeaking sound. I silenced him with a gesture. You want proof? Colonel Hunt asked, not waiting for an answer. She tapped something on her desk, and files began flooding my console. Battle of Stalingrad. Women snipers. Over 2,000 confirmed kills between them. The Night Witches. Female pilots who flew bombing missions in wooden planes that were so quiet, the enemy called them witches. Female guerrilla fighters in every major conflict. Resistance fighters, saboteurs, spies, medics who held soldiers together with nothing but thread and determination. The files kept coming. Images, battle reports, casualty statistics that made my stomachs churn. And that is just our official history, she said quietly. That is not counting the unofficial history. The women who defended their homes, their children, their communities with whatever weapons they could find. The mothers who became monsters to protect what they loved. The daughters who learned to kill before they learned to cook. I cleared my throat, a rasping sound that betrayed my discomfort. This is unexpected. Most things about humans are, she replied, sitting back down. So, here is my offer. I will send you 200 of our most dangerous, most capable, most absolutely terrifying female soldiers. They will integrate with your forces. They will follow your command structure, and they will fight your war. But you need to promise me one thing. What? I asked, already knowing I was going to agree to whatever she demanded. Do not underestimate them, she said simply. Do not protect them. Do not coddle them. Do not treat them like they are fragile. Put them where the fighting is worst, and watch what happens. Can you do that? I thought about the Kryllian advance. I thought about the casualty reports stacking up like cordwood. I thought about the desperate, terrified faces of species begging for protection that I could not provide. Yes, I said, I can do that. Excellent. Colonel Hunt smiled again, and this time it reached her eyes. They will arrive at your primary staging facility in 4 cycles. Their commanding officer is Major Elena Vasquez. She is, well, you will see. Good luck, Officer Velkrin. You are going to need it. The communication cut off before I could ask what she meant by that last part. Jibbix turned to me, all 8 of his eyes wide with concern. Sir, with respect, this seems inadvisable. If these humans are as dangerous as she claims, What if they turn that danger on us? What if they are unstable or violent or— Then we point them at the Kryllians and watch the fireworks, I interrupted. We are out of options, Jibbix. If these human women can fight half as well as that colonel implied, we might actually survive this war. 4 cycles later, I stood in the landing bay watching the human transport ship descend. It was a blocky utilitarian vessel that looked like it had been designed by someone who fundamentally did not care about aesthetics. The hull was scarred with what looked like combat damage, only partially repaired. The landing ramp extended with a pneumatic hiss. Nothing happened for exactly 30 seconds, long enough that I started to wonder if something had gone wrong. Then music started playing. Actual music, blasting from speakers on the transport ship. Something with a heavy beat and aggressive vocals that made my auditory receptors vibrate uncomfortably. The translator struggled with the lyrics, catching phrases like "raise hell" and "bring the fire" and "no mercy." The first human woman walked down the ramp. She was shorter than I expected, barely reaching my mid-thorax. Dark skin, closely cropped black hair, and eyes that swept across the landing bay with the precision of a targeting computer. She wore armor that looked almost primitive compared to Coalition standards, but something about the way she carried herself made it clear she had no need for better protection. A patch on her shoulder read, "Major Elena Vasquez, Earth Expeditionary Force." Behind her came the others. They filed down in perfect formation, 2 by 2, 200 human women in various sizes, shapes, and colors. Some were tall and broad, others small and wiry. Some had hair in elaborate styles, others were shaved nearly bald. Some had visible scars, others looked fresh from training. But every single one of them moved with the same predatory confidence. They assembled in the landing bay in less than 3 minutes, standing at attention in neat rows while that aggressive music continued to pound through the air. Then Major Vasquez raised one hand, and someone cut the sound. The silence was somehow more intimidating than the noise had been. Vasquez walked toward me, her boots clicking on the metal deck plating. She stopped precisely 3 paces away, and executed a salute that would have made a ceremonial guard jealous. "Major Elena Vasquez reporting with Echo Company. Officer Velkrin," she said in galactic standard that was far too perfect for someone whose species just learned the language. 200 combat-ready personnel, ready for deployment. I returned the salute awkwardly with my upper right arm. "Welcome to Forward Operating Base Meridian, Major. We have prepared quarters for your personnel, and will begin integration briefings in 6 hours. "With respect, sir," Vasquez said, and I already did not like where this was going. "We did not come here to sit in briefings. Where is the fighting?" Jibbix made that squeaking sound again. Several of my other staff officers shifted nervously. "Major," I said carefully, "your personnel need time to acclimate to our equipment, our communication protocols, our tactical frameworks. The front line is not a place for—" "For what?" Vasquez interrupted. Behind her, 200 human women suddenly looked very interested in my answer. "For females? For newcomers? For humans?" The air in the landing bay felt extremely thin. "For anyone who is not prepared," I finished lamely. Vasquez smiled. It was not a nice smile. "Officer Velkrin, we have been preparing for this since before you knew we existed. Humanity has been studying your broadcasts, your tactics, your enemies for the last 3 years. We know the Kryllians. We know their strategies, their weapons, their weaknesses. We know them better than you do. Because you have been fighting them for so long, you stopped really looking." She took a step closer, and I resisted the urge to back up. "So here is what is going to happen," she continued, in a voice that somehow carried across the entire bay. You are going to take us to wherever your line is weakest. You are going to put us there. And you are going to watch us do what human women do best. Which is? I asked, already knowing I was making a mistake. Her smile widened. Survive what should not be survivable. Fight what should not be fightable. Win what should not be winnable. Behind her, 200 voices spoke in perfect unison. Hoo-ah! The sound echoed off the bay walls like a war cry from the galaxy's oldest nightmares. I looked at Jibbix. He looked back at me with an expression that clearly said, I told you, this was a bad idea. I looked back at Major Vasquez and her small army of human women who were staring at me with expressions ranging from eager anticipation to barely concealed bloodlust. Sector 7, I heard myself say. Defense line Echo 9. The Kryllians broke through last week. We have been losing 20 meters of ground per day. Current defenders are requesting emergency evacuation. Perfect, Vasquez said, like I had just offered her a vacation destination. When do we deploy? You need equipment, training on coalition weapons, communication gear, medical briefings, at least 48 hours of... We brought our own equipment, she interrupted again. Human weapons, human communications, human medical protocols. We learned long ago not to rely on alien technology in combat situations. No offense. Some taken, I muttered. 48 hours is 48 hours we do not have, Vasquez continued relentlessly. Based on your casualty reports, the Kryllians will break through Echo 9 in approximately 36 hours. So unless you want to abandon another defensive position and explain to your superiors why you left 200 human volunteers sitting on their hands while soldiers died, I suggest we get moving. She was right. I hated that she was right, but she was absolutely right. Fine, I said, feeling control of the situation slip completely from my grasp. But when this goes wrong, when your people start taking casualties, when the reality of fighting the Kryllians hits you, do not say I did not warn you. Major Vasquez's smile finally reached her eyes. Officer Velkrin, I appreciate your concern. I really do. But there is something you need to understand about human women. What is that? I asked tiredly. We have been fighting battles everyone said we would lose since before your species left your homeworld, she said quietly. We have been told we are too weak, too emotional, too fragile, too valuable to risk. We have heard every reason why we should not fight, should not lead, should not exist anywhere near a battlefield. And you know what we did with those objections? What? Jibbix whispered. We burned them, Vasquez said simply. We took every doubt, every dismissal, every underestimation, and we used them as fuel. So please, Officer Velkrin, please underestimate us. Please tell us the mission is too dangerous. Please act surprised when we not only survive, but excel. It just makes victory taste sweeter. She turned smartly on her heel. Echo Company, prepare for immediate deployment. Check your gear, load your weapons, and say your prayers if you got them. We have got a defense line to save and aliens to impress. The 200 human women moved with terrifying efficiency, breaking formation and heading back toward their transport to retrieve equipment. Their movements were practiced, coordinated, and somehow still managed to look casual. I stood there in the landing bay, watching them work, and felt the first stirring of something I had not felt in months. Hope, mixed with a healthy dose of terror, but still, hope. Sir, Jibbix said quietly beside me, I think we may have made a significant miscalculation. About what? I asked, not taking my eyes off the humans as they hauled out weapons that looked far too large for their frames. "About humans in general," he replied. "And human women specifically." "What do you mean?" Jibbix pointed with one of his manipulators at Major Vasquez, who was now helping her troops load equipment crates onto hover platforms. "Look at how they move. Look at how they work together. Look at the way they carry themselves. These are not just soldiers, sir. These are predators. And we just put them on the same battlefield as the galaxy's other apex predators." I watched Vasquez heft a ammunition crate that probably weighed half her body mass without even breathing hard. I watched her troops laugh and joke while checking weapons that looked designed to commit war crimes. I watched them transform the landing bay into a staging area in under 15 minutes. "You know what the worst part is?" I asked Jibbix. "What is that, sir?" "I think they are actually excited about this," I said. "They are genuinely looking forward to fighting the Kryllians." "Who does that?" "Humans, apparently," Jibbix replied. "May the ancestors help the Kryllians. I do not think they know what is coming." "Neither do we," I muttered. "Neither do we." Major Vasquez approached me one final time before they boarded the transport for Sector 7. She handed me a small device that my scanners identified as a recording unit. "What is this?" I asked. "Proof," she said simply. "When we get to Echo 9, keep this running. Send the footage to Colonel Hunt and to your superiors. We want everyone to see what happens when you give human women a mission." "Why?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Why does it matter if people see?" Her expression softened slightly, becoming something almost sad. "Because, for thousands of years, Officer Velkrin, human women have fought and bled and died in wars that history books barely mentioned us in. We have been erased, footnoted, or dismissed as anomalies. Not this time. This time the galaxy is going to see exactly what we can do. This time, they are going to remember." She walked away before I could respond, leaving me holding the recording device and watching 200 human women board a transport headed straight into the worst fighting the Coalition had seen in decades. They were singing as the ramp closed, actually singing, voices raised in something the translator struggled with, but eventually rendered as a song about survival, defiance, and refusing to be broken. The transport lifted off, engines screaming, and disappeared into the star-speckled darkness of space. Jibbix and I stood in the landing bay for a long moment after they left. "How long do you think they will last?" he finally asked. I thought about Colonel Hunt's smile. I thought about Major Vasquez's confidence. I thought about 200 women who apparently volunteered to fight aliens in a war that was not even technically their species' problem yet. "I have absolutely no idea," I admitted, "but I cannot wait to find out." The recording device in my hand activated automatically, already streaming data back to Coalition Command. Whatever happened at Echo 9, the entire galaxy was about to witness it. For better or for worse, humanity had arrived, and they brought their daughters to the war. The command center at Echo 9 looked like someone had tried to organize a funeral during an earthquake. Holographic displays flickered with damage reports, casualty lists scrolled endlessly across screens, and the remaining defenders moved with the sluggish exhaustion of soldiers who had already accepted their deaths. The base commander, a four-armed Skelix named Commander Thrace, looked like he had aged a decade in the past week. "Officer Velkrin," he greeted me without bothering to salute. "Did you bring reinforcements, or did you come to watch us die in person?" "Reinforcements," I confirmed, gesturing to the view screen where the human transport was making its final approach. 200 human combatants. Female division. Thrace's facial plates rippled in what I had learned was Skellig's laughter. "Female, you brought us breeding stock while we are getting slaughtered. What exactly are they supposed to do? Negotiate a peace treaty through diplomatic seduction?" Before I could respond, the communications officer, a young Plickton who looked barely old enough to enlist, interrupted nervously. "Commander, the human transport is requesting permission to land directly on the forward defensive wall. They say the main landing pad is too far from the action." "Denied," Thrace said immediately. "That position is under active bombardment. They will land at the secondary facility like everyone else and march to the front like proper soldiers." The communications officer listened to his earpiece, his chromatic scales shifting through colors that indicated distress. "Sir, the human commander says, and I quote, 'Tell the four-armed fossil that we did not come here for a scenic tour. We are landing on that wall in 2 minutes, whether he likes it or not.' Her words, sir, not mine." I winced. Thrace's facial plates locked into a position that definitely meant anger. "Who does this human think she is?" he demanded. "Major Elena Vasquez," I supplied helpfully, "and based on my brief interaction with her, I suspect she meant every word of that statement." Thrace stared at the view screen where the transport ship was already descending toward the forward wall, completely ignoring standard approach patterns. "Fine. Let them land wherever they want. When the Kryllians blow them out of the sky, it will not be my fault. Except the Kryllians did try to blow them out of the sky." 3 plasma missiles launched from the enemy positions, streaking toward the transport with deadly accuracy. I watched the display, already composing the casualty report in my head, already dreading the conversation with Colonel Hunt, where I would have to explain how her soldiers died before even reaching the ground. The transport did not evade, did not deploy countermeasures, did not do anything that made tactical sense. Instead, something launched from its ventral weapon ports. Not missiles, not conventional ordnance. Something small and fast that my sensors could barely track. The objects intercepted the plasma missiles mid-flight. There was a series of sharp detonations that looked wrong, the explosions too compact, too controlled. When the light cleared, the missiles were simply gone, neutralized before they could reach their target. "What was that?" Thrace demanded, his voice climbing an octave. "Human point defense system," I said, reading the technical analysis scrolling across my screen. "Kinetic interceptors. Basically, they shoot bullets at missiles." "That is insane," the communications officer whispered. "That should not work. The timing requirements, the accuracy needed, the—" "And yet it did work," I interrupted, watching the transport settle onto the forward wall with a grace that belied its blocky design. "Welcome to humanity, where apparently impossible just means no one tried hard enough yet." The transport ramp opened. This time there was no music, no ceremony. Major Vasquez emerged first, took exactly 3 seconds to assess the situation, and started barking orders in a language my translator could not keep up with. Her troops poured out behind her, moving with the fluid coordination of a single organism. They spread across the defensive wall in under 5 minutes, each squad taking up positions that I had to admit were tactically brilliant. They placed themselves at every weak point, every gap in our coverage, every angle where the Kryllians had been exploiting our defenses, and they did it while carrying equipment that made our standard armaments look like children's toys. "What are those weapons?" Thrace asked, his earlier hostility replaced by genuine curiosity. I magnified the display. According to the technical specifications they provided, those are M249 light machine guns, M4 carbines, and several systems my database cannot identify because humanity apparently invents new ways to kill things faster than we can catalog them. One human soldier a tall woman with red hair tied back in a practical braid, was setting up something that looked like an oversized tube on a tripod. She worked with casual efficiency, humming something my translator rendered as a song about fire and destruction. "That one," I said, pointing. "That is a Javelin anti-armor missile system, designed for destroying heavy vehicles." "The Kryllians do not use heavy vehicles," Thrace objected. "They use infantry swarms and light attack craft." "I suspect," I said slowly, "that the humans know that. I also suspect they brought those weapons anyway because they enjoy being overprepared." Major Vasquez appeared on our communication channel without bothering to request access. Her face filled the primary screen, and even through the holographic distortion, her expression radiated a combination of excitement and irritation. "Commander Thrace," she said, pronouncing his name with an accent that mangled the clicks but conveyed the meaning. "Major Vasquez, Echo Company. We are in position. What is the situation?" Thrace recovered his composure admirably. "Major, the Kryllians have been probing our defenses every 4 hours. The next assault is projected to begin in approximately 40 minutes. They typically attack with wave formations, 5,000 strong, using their natural speed and numbers to overwhelm defensive positions. Our casualty rate per engagement is approximately 30%, and we have lost more ground with each wave." Vasquez nodded, her eyes scanning something off-screen. "Understood. What about air support?" "Limited," Thrace admitted. "Coalition fighters are engaged in 3 other sectors. We have drone coverage, but the Kryllians have been adapting their jamming techniques." "Artillery?" Vasquez asked. "2 batteries, but ammunition is low. We are rationing shots." Vasquez's smile was sharp enough to cut steel. "Commander, with respect, stop rationing. When this next wave comes, I want you to hit them with everything you have got. Do not worry about conserving ammunition. Trust me on this." Thrace's facial plates rippled again. "Major, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but this is not your first battle. We need to maintain reserves for—" "For what?" Vasquez interrupted. "For the wave after this one? The wave after that? Commander, you are not fighting a siege. You are fighting a war of attrition that you are losing. So let us change the game." "How?" I asked before I could stop myself. She looked directly at me, and her smile widened. "Officer Velkrin, good to see you made it. You are about to get your answer. Keep that recording device running. This is going to be interesting." The communication cut off. Thrace looked at me. I looked back at him. Neither of us said what we were both thinking. We had just handed control of our defensive strategy to a species that learned space travel less than a year ago. "This is either brilliant or catastrophic," Thrace finally said. "Often," I replied, "those 2 things look identical until after the smoke clears." 38 minutes later, the Kryllians came. They always moved like a natural disaster, a living tide of chitin and claws that flowed across the landscape with terrible purpose. 5,000 strong, just as Thrace predicted, their primary assault force screaming that distinctive hunting call that had broken the morale of 100 species. Our remaining defenders opened fire, their weapons creating a wall of plasma and kinetic rounds that tore into the first ranks of Kryllians. The aliens absorbed the casualties without slowing, their tactics based on the simple mathematical principle that they could lose hundreds and still have thousands left to breach the walls. It had worked for them for 3 years. It had cost the Coalition 17 worlds. Then the humans opened fire, and mathematics stopped making sense. The sound alone was different. Coalition weapons produced high-pitched whines or low thrums. Human weapons produced something raw and visceral, a chattering roar that sounded like controlled fury given voice. The M249s laid down suppressing fire that created kill zones where nothing could survive. The M4s provided precision shots that dropped Kryllian's mid-leap with brutal efficiency. But it was not just the weapons. It was how they used them. Human soldiers did not fire randomly into the swarm. They targeted specific Kryllians, the larger ones, the ones that were clearly leading squad formations. Every 3-round burst dropped a target. No wasted ammunition, no panic firing, just cold mechanical efficiency wrapped in organic tissue. Impossible, Thrace whispered beside me. Their accuracy rate is above 90%. No species maintains that kind of precision under combat stress. Human women, apparently, are not like other species, I said, unable to look away from the displays. The Kryllian wave crashed against the defensive wall like water hitting a cliff face. They tried to scale the fortifications, tried to find weaknesses, tried to use their numerical advantage. The humans did not give them time. A Kryllian made it halfway up the wall before a human soldier, small enough that she looked like she should still be in training, grabbed it by one of its primary limbs and physically threw it back down onto its companions. The movement was so casual, so effortless, that I had to replay the footage to confirm what I had seen. Did she just? The communications officer started. Yes, I confirmed. She just grabbed a 200-pound Kryllian warrior and threw it like discarding trash. Another section of wall came under concentrated assault. Kryllians piled on top of each other, creating a living ramp to overwhelm the defenses. 3 human soldiers responded by pulling pins on small cylindrical objects and simply dropping them into the mass of aliens below. The grenades detonated with sharp cracks that sent Kryllian body parts in every direction. The human soldiers did not even flinch, just reloaded and continued firing. They are not even concerned, Thrace said, his voice hollow with disbelief. They are fighting like this is a training exercise. Look at that one, I said, pointing to a human with short blonde hair who was literally laughing while mowing down Kryllians with her machine gun. She is enjoying this. That is not natural, the communications officer protested. Species do not enjoy combat. They endure it. They survive it. They do not laugh while doing it. Human women, I said, beginning to understand something profound and terrifying, appear to be several standard deviations outside normal behavioral patterns. Then Major Vasquez did something that would be analyzed in military academies for the next century. The Kryllians, sensing their frontal assault was failing, attempted their standard flanking maneuver. 2 secondary forces, each 1,000 strong, split off from the main body to hit the wall from both sides simultaneously. It was a proven tactic that had worked in dozens of engagements. Vasquez had been waiting for it. All units, execute Maneuver Delta 7. Her voice came across the command channel, calm as someone ordering lunch. Ladies, time to introduce our guests to some Earth hospitality. Half of her force, 100 human soldiers, suddenly abandoned the wall. What are they doing? Thrace demanded. They are leaving their positions. They are flanking the flankers, I finished, watching the tactical display with something approaching awe. The human soldiers moved faster than any species in coalition space had a right to move. They did not run. They sprinted, covering ground with a speed that suggested their homeworld had gravity, twice what we considered standard. They reached the Kryllian flanking forces before the aliens even realized they had left the wall. What followed was not a battle. It was a lesson in applied violence. The humans hit the Kryllians from the side, but instead of using ranged weapons, they closed to melee range. They used knives, combat batons, and in one case that I watched with mounting horror, simply their fists. A human soldier, her dark skin gleaming with sweat, grabbed a Kryllian by its head crest and kneed it in what I could only assume was a vulnerable spot based on how quickly it stopped moving. Another human executed a spinning kick that broke a Kryllian's primary limb at an angle that made even me feel sympathetic pain. "They are fighting hand to hand," Thrace said numbly. "With Kryllians, species that have evolved for close combat. This should not work." And yet, I gestured at the display where human soldiers were systematically destroying Kryllian formations through sheer aggressive brutality. The battle lasted 18 minutes. When it ended, the Kryllians were in full retreat, something I had never witnessed before. They left behind approximately 2,000 dead, a casualty rate that would cripple their offensive capabilities in this sector for weeks. Human casualties, 0. Not injured, not wounded, 0. Major Vasquez walked back into the command center like she had just returned from a jog. Her armor was scorched, her face was covered in something that was probably Kryllian blood, and she was smiling like someone who had just won a bet. "Commander Thrace," she said cheerfully, "I believe we have stabilized your defensive line. Would you like us to hold this position, or should we start pushing forward?" Thrace just stared at her. All 4 of his arms hung limply at his sides. "Pushing forward?" he finally managed. "Major, we have been losing ground for months. Nobody pushes forward against the Kryllians." Vasquez's smile turned predatory. "Nobody human has fought the Kryllians before. I think it is time we showed the galaxy what happens when you threaten species under coalition protection." She paused. "Also, my soldiers are bored. 18 minutes of combat is not enough for them. They are going to get restless if we just sit here." "Bored," I repeated faintly. "Your soldiers are bored." "Well, yes," Vasquez said, like this should be obvious. "We trained for 6 months for this deployment. We studied Kryllian tactics, practiced counters, ran simulations. That wave was basically a validation of our training program. We need something more challenging, or they are going to start getting creative. And trust me, you do not want human soldiers getting creative with free time." The communications officer suddenly sat up straight, his scales flashing urgent orange. "Commander, we are receiving transmissions from adjacent defensive positions. They want to know what happened. They are detecting Kryllian retreat across the entire front line." "Entire front line?" Thrace repeated. I checked the tactical display. He was right. The Kryllians were not just retreating from Echo 9. They were pulling back from 5 different positions simultaneously, consolidating their forces in a defensive posture. "They are scared," I said, the realization hitting me like physical impact. "The Kryllians are actually scared." Vasquez nodded. "Of course they are. You just showed them something they have never encountered before. A defensive position that did not break. Soldiers that fought harder as the battle intensified. An enemy that seemed to enjoy combat as much as they do. That is terrifying from a psychological warfare perspective." "You planned this," Thrace accused. "You wanted them to see what human women could do." "I wanted everyone to see," Vasquez corrected. "The Kryllians, the Coalition, every species watching those recordings that Officer Velkrin is streaming across the galaxy. Human women are here. We are combat capable. We are not going anywhere. And if you underestimate us, you do so at your own peril." My communication panel lit up with incoming calls. Coalition Command, Military Intelligence. Even the Council of Species was requesting immediate briefings. Everyone wanted to know about the humans, about what had just happened, about what 200 soldiers had accomplished in 18 minutes. "Officer Velkrin," Vasquez said, drawing my attention back to her. I believe you have some reports to file. Tell them the truth. Tell them human women fought, survived, and won. Tell them we are ready for whatever comes next." "And what does come next?" I asked. Her smile could have launched starships. "We keep fighting. We keep winning. We keep proving that human women belong on any battlefield, in any war, facing any enemy. Because that is what we do. That is what we have always done. The galaxy just gets to watch this time." Over the next 3 weeks, Echo Company did not just hold the line at Echo 9. They started pushing forward, reclaiming territory that the Coalition had written off as lost. Other human forces arrived, equally divided between male and female soldiers, but it was Vasquez's Echo Company that remained the tip of the spear. I watched them train Coalition forces in their tactics. I watched them integrate seamlessly with alien species who initially did not want them there. I watched them win respect not through words or political maneuvering, but through simple, undeniable competence. I also watched the recordings that Colonel Hunt had requested. They spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Species that had never heard of humans suddenly knew their name. Military commanders studied their tactics. Politicians debated their role in Coalition defense. But mostly, I watched something more subtle happen. I watched female soldiers from other species start requesting combat postings they had been denied before. I watched commanders who had protected their female populations start reconsidering those policies. I watched an entire galaxy's assumptions about gender and combat capabilities begin to shift. All because 200 human women showed up and refused to accept limitations. 3 months after their arrival, I stood in the same landing bay where I had first met them, watching Echo Company prepare to ship out to a new assignment. Major Vasquez approached me, still wearing that same confident smile. "Officer Velkrin," she greeted. "Come to see us off?" "I came to say thank you," I corrected. "Your soldiers saved this base, probably saved this entire sector. The Coalition owes humanity a debt." "The Coalition owes human women a debt," she corrected gently. "Let us be specific about who did the work here." "Fair enough," I conceded. "I have a question, though, something I have been wondering since you arrived." "Go ahead." "Why?" I asked simply. "Why did Colonel Hunt insist on sending only women? Why make that the defining characteristic of this unit?" Vasquez was quiet for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "Because for most of human history, Officer Velkrin, women had to fight twice as hard to get half the recognition. We had to be twice as strong, twice as skilled, twice as dedicated just to be considered equal. And even then, people found reasons to dismiss us, to minimize our contributions, to claim we were exceptions or anomalies." She gestured at her soldiers loading equipment behind her. So when the galaxy asked humanity for soldiers, Colonel Hunt saw an opportunity. Not just to send capable fighters, but to make an undeniable statement. To show every species in Coalition space that human women are not support personnel or logistics staff or medical providers. We are warriors. We are leaders. We are every bit as dangerous, as capable, as essential as our male counterparts. "You succeeded," I said simply. "Everyone knows about Echo Company now, about what you accomplished here." "Good," Vasquez said. "Because there are billions of human women back on Earth watching these recordings. Young girls who are seeing themselves represented in ways they never have before. They are seeing that their gender does not limit their potential. They are seeing that they can be soldiers, commanders, heroes. That is why it mattered that we were all women. That is why Colonel Hunt sent us." The transport ramp began to lower. Behind it, I could see the other members of Echo Company waiting, ready for their next assignment. "Where are they sending you?" I asked. Vasquez's smile returned in full force. Classified. But I can tell you it involves the Kryllian home system and a mission that Command thinks is probably impossible. Probably impossible? I repeated. Which means, she said, already walking toward the transport, that it is exactly the right mission for human women. We specialize in making the impossible look routine. She paused at the base of the ramp and looked back at me. Officer Velkrin, thank you for taking a chance on us. Thank you for putting us where we needed to be. And thank you for recording everything, because now the galaxy knows. They cannot unhear us. They cannot unsee us. Human women are here to stay. The ramp closed, the transport lifted off, and 200 human women disappeared into the stars to fight battles that history would definitely remember this time. I stood in the empty landing bay for a long time after they left, thinking about assumptions, about limitations, about how many other species might be artificially restricting their own capabilities based on outdated ideas about who could fight and who should be protected. Jibbix found me there an hour later. Sir, Coalition Command is asking for your final assessment of the human forces. I thought about 18 minutes of combat that changed military doctrine across 100 worlds. I thought about soldiers who laughed while fighting impossible odds. I thought about a major who understood psychological warfare better than generals with centuries of experience. Tell them, I said slowly, that humanity sent us exactly what we needed. Not just soldiers, not just warriors. They sent us proof that the galaxy had been operating under false assumptions about half our potential fighting forces. They sent us a lesson wrapped in armor and armed with weapons we could not pronounce. They sent us their daughters, and their daughters won. That is quite poetic, sir, Jibbix observed. That is accurate, I corrected. The galaxy asked for soldiers. Humans sent the legendary women that aliens will whisper about for generations. And honestly, I think we got the better end of that deal. Somewhere in Coalition space, 200 human women were already fighting their next battle, winning their next impossible victory, and proving once again that limitations only exist until someone refuses to accept them. The galaxy had asked for help. Humanity had answered. And they would never, ever forget the women who showed up ready to fight.